Imagine a predator that hunts not with teeth or claws, but with perfect, paralyzing poetry. It's a trap, relying on the target walking in willingly, ignoring the danger for the sake of the language, until it snaps shut. Hozier's Talk presents a calculated admission of manipulation hidden within the cadence of a love song. Released on the 2019 album Wasteland Baby, the track finds the Irish singer-songwriter moving away from the earnestness of his earlier work to inhabit a much more cynical perspective. Structurally, the song balances a facade of epic mythical devotion against the reality of carnal release. This division is strictly chronological. The verses build a myth, while choruses break the fourth wall to admit it's a distraction. To map the mechanics of this distraction, we can apply the classical academic frameworks of desire. First is Amor, the classical ideal of mutual love and pure, selfless devotion. Then comes Furor, the consuming, irrational frenzy or madness that often drives tragic figures to their ruin. Finally, there is Libido Dominandi, the specific lust for power and dominance over another. The narrator uses the high aesthetic of antiquity to anchor these forces, creating a tension between the vocabulary of the past and his specific intent in the present. The song opens by establishing a tragic, mythical stage. I'd be the voice that urged Orpheus when her body was found. I'd be the choiceless hope in grief that drove him underground. This points directly to Orpheus, the musician who was so talented he could move trees and stones, but who was ultimately defined by his inability to accept the death of his bride, Eurydice. His descent is a classical catabasis, a hero's journey into the underworld to retrieve what has been lost. In the myth, Orpheus overcomes impossible obstacles and moves the heart of Hades himself, elevating his devotion to the status of a demigod. But the narrator is not claiming to be Orpheus. He isn't the hero of the story. By claiming to be the voice and the choiceless hope, the narrator identifies as the Furor, the abstract psychological frenzy that pushes Orpheus into the underworld. This shifts as we reach the tragedy in lines 5 through 8. I'd be the dreadful need in the devotee that made him turn around. In the myth, Orpheus fails at the very threshold of the living world. He turns to look at Eurydice before they are clear of the shadows, and she vanishes forever. The narrator claims responsibility for this. He is the dreadful need that causes the hero to fail. Historically, ancient accounts like this one from Ovid's Metamorphoses suggest Eurydice vanished with only a faint farewell, offering no specific pardon for her husband's failure. Hozier's narrator, however, invents an immediate forgiveness in Eurydice. He is rewriting the myth to ensure that even his most destructive impulses result in his own absolution. By claiming to be the force that drives the tragedy and the voice that forgives it, the narrator removes any sense of romantic vulnerability. He is positioning himself as an omnipotent force. The chorus brings a sudden shift. The mythical grandiosity is cut short as the narrator breaks the fourth wall. He addresses the listener directly, creating a moment of psychological whiplash where the previous 8 lines are revealed as a performance. The manuscript reveals the core admission: I won't deny I've got in my mind now all the things we do, so I'll try to talk refined for fear that you find out how I'm imagining you. To talk refined is to admit that the previous language was a rhetorical tool, a chosen mask. The epic tragedy of Orpheus was merely a smokescreen used to occupy the target's mind. The true goal is the physical release driven by the narrator's imagination. From an academic perspective, this chorus demonstrates the unsolicited male gaze, where the body of the listener becomes both the agent and the object of a predatory desire. This strips away the illusion of Amor. What remains is a stark display of Libido Dominandi. In the second verse, the narrator resumes his refined talk, but the imagery becomes significantly darker. He moves away from Greek myth toward a more existential finality. I'd be the last shred of truth in the lost myth of true love. I'd be the sweet feeling of release mankind now dreams of. He is tracking a shift from the romanticized past into a very physical, biological present. This sweet feeling of release functions as a poetic personification of physical climax. The verse concludes by scaling this release to a global scale. That's found in the last witness, before the wave hits, marveling at God before he feels alone one final time, and marries the sea. The text utilizes eschatological and biblical imagery, a last witness facing down an impending, unavoidable catastrophe. He equates the sheer intensity of his physical release with the terrifying, sublime awe of the apocalypse itself. To marry the sea represents total destruction, evoking the isolation of a man choosing his own end. This tactic takes a primal biological instinct and scales it to the size of a cosmic cataclysm. By framing his lust as a world-ending event, the narrator attempts to completely overwhelm the listener's ability to resist. Looking at the entire structure of the song, we can see the path the narrator has built. The listener is pushed from a foundation of myth and trust through a sudden trap of realization before landing in a very visceral reality. The rhetorical strategy here is to use the beauty of epic tragedy to bypass intellectual defenses. This mirrors Ovidian narrative techniques, where the narrator's voice and obsessive desire are used to pervert and impose upon the progression of the story. The intensity of this voice has a paralyzing effect on the listener, narrowing the perspective until only the narrator's gaze remains. Just as Ovid used mythology to navigate the politics and desires of Rome, Hozier uses it to explore the power imbalances inherent in modern advances. A specific irony emerges from the track's execution. The listener is given all the evidence. They know the narrator is performing, and that the myth is a distraction from a purely physical intent. And yet, even with this knowledge, because the language is so carefully constructed, the seduction remains completely and utterly effective. Talk functions as a dark, analytical study of the specific, irresistible danger inherent in talking refined.
The anatomy continues. If you want to join the next dissection, make sure to subscribe and enable notifications. I want to hear your perspective. Leave a comment below with your analysis of talk and watch out for our next post as we dive into Hozier's work song.